Alright, hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study of the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We're currently in Genesis chapter 47, and I want to do a quick review. Some 22 years earlier, Joseph's brothers have sold him into slavery. While in Egypt, he's a slave, then accused of rape, then put in prison, and while in prison, uh, Pharaoh enslaved his butler and cook. Okay, uh, we're not told exactly what they did, but anyway, um, God gives each of them a dream. Joseph interprets the dream. The dreams come to pass, and then 2 years later, God gives Pharaoh a dream, and then the butler remembers that, hey, this dude in prison interpret my dream and it came to pass. They call for Joseph. Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream and tells him of what God was going to do in the land, which is a severe famine would come in 7 years. He also tells Joseph that the first 7 years would be a plentiful harvest, followed by a severe famine. Um, Pharaoh is so impressed with Joseph, he appoints him number 2 ruler under him in Egypt. 2 years after the famine begins, Joseph sends Joseph's brothers, to buy food, which they don't realize that their brother is now ruler of Egypt. He takes him through a test, a grueling test, I would say. But then he reveals himself to his brothers, and then he sends for his father to come and live in Egypt. And this is where we are here. There's this great reunion. Joseph takes them before Pharaoh. Pharaoh commands Joseph to give them the best land in Egypt. I want us to keep this in mind, the gratitude that not only Pharaoh but also Egypt has towards God's favor through Joseph. Keep that in mind, because that's soon going to be forgotten. All right, so what I want to talk about, get into and close out this chapter, because I almost forgot if it's going to move on to chapter 48, but this, and you can see by the title of the thumbnail, Joseph's social and welfare programs saved Egypt. And the reason why I wanted to kind of title it that way, especially the mentality some of us have towards welfare and social programs today. And now it's amazing because it all depends on what political party you affiliate with in terms of the opinions. And there are some who have demonized welfare, but that's a political and also racial kind of motivation there. While at the same time, the same people have no problem with the wealthy, the kind of social and welfare, what they call corporate welfare programs afforded to billionaires and their companies, right? Even in some cases, eminent domain, where they say, well, we want a property there, and they will use the government on rare occasions to seize property to build houses. You don't think I'll give you a prime example of this for those of you that live in the St. Louis area. You just go out by the airport, and what was once the city called Kinloch was taken over by eminent domain under the guise that they were going to expand the airport. And now you see this giant welfare that has just kind of taken up half of the city of Kinloch. Now I know this because Kinloch is the kind of hometown of my parents, that my parents grew up in the city of Kinloch. That's a good example of that. Now, when administered properly, social and welfare programs could be a good thing. And I think Joseph brings this out. He shows us this in that. So I want to get into that. So let's all right, where are we at here? And this is I'm going to start at verse 11. This is right after the great reunion of Joseph and his father. Verse 11 says, Then Joseph settled his father and brothers in the land of Egypt and gave them property in the best part of the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided his fathers, his brothers, and all of his father's household with food for their dependents. But there was no food in the entire region, for the famine was very severe. This is what Joseph had prophesied. The first 7 years have come to pass, and now they're into the actually third year of the famine. Joseph had told them there's 5 years left. There's going to be 7 years of famine. By the time when Joseph's brothers meet him, it's already been 2 years. Verse 13 again, but there was no food in the entire region, for the famine was very severe. The land of Egypt and the land of Canaan were exhausted by the famine. Joseph collected all the money to be found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan in exchange for the grain that they were purchasing, and he brought the money to Pharaoh's palace. So right here, we're going to see how Egypt becomes a mighty nation, a wealthy nation. We're also going to see how Joseph, through wisdom, saves Egypt. All right, verse 15. He says, When the money from the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan was gone, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, Give us food. Why should we die here in front of you? The money is gone. Now, so kind of see what's set up here. They at first they were buying the food. Now that's interesting in itself, because this is what I want to say here. And I think anyone who is involved in lending to the poor, giving money to the poor, anyone who is involved in that knows. And some of you, just on a personal, now I want to see something, on a personal level, because this has happened to me numerous times, where people will come and they will ask me, okay, they will ask me, can you loan me some money? I got to pay a gas bill, I got to do this, I got to do that, whatever, right? And I'll say, well, sure, right? At the time, I was like, sure. And then I begin to find out that these people had money in the bank. They had money in 401k, right? They had money all kinds of places. They just didn't want to touch it. So they came to me and borrowed money. You know, sort of like, other people's money, OPM, right? Other people's money. Now, if you're involved in the church, a church should make sure, hey, that you don't have any money anywhere before you come to us. That may seem cold, but it's not. Why are you coming to the church? In 1 Timothy chapter 5, in dealing with the widows, putting them on what was called the church rolls for support. Paul's instructions was, make sure that there's no one else in their family that'll take care of them. So we see even this wisdom here with Joseph. And there is a wisdom, because if people know that, why should I spend my money when I can borrow your money? No. So at this point, notice all of the money is gone. All of the money of Egypt is gone. They have nothing else, which means they had to spend it first. And how Joseph did that? You buy the grain. He just didn't give the grain, even though the food, remember, was stored for that time. But notice what he says right here. All the money is gone. There is no more money. All right. So verse 16, he says, but Joseph said, give me your livestock. Now think about that now. See, so they had goods, right? In other words, if you want to come to the government first, Notice he said, no, give me your livestock. Since the money is gone, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them food in exchange for their horses, for the herds of sheep, for the herds of cattle, and the donkeys. That year he provided them with food in exchange for their livestock. When that year was over, they came the next year and said to him, we cannot hide from our Lord that the money is gone and all our livestock belongs to our Lord. There is nothing left for our Lord except our bodies and our lands. Why should we die here in front of you, both us and our children? Buy us and our land in exchange for food. Then with our land will become the land will become Pharaoh's slaves. Give us seed so that we can live and not die, and so that the land won't become desolate. In this way, Joseph acquired all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh, because every Egyptian sold his field since the famine was so severe. Now remember, there was just nothing out there to buy, but Joseph had already provided. The land became Pharaoh's. Verse 21. And Joseph moved the people to cities from one end of Egypt to the other. The only land he didn't acquire was the priest's portion, for it was given to them by Pharaoh. They lived off of the rations Pharaoh had given them, for they did not sell their land. Now, this would be something even, of course, God would implement later on with the children of Israel, that the Levites would not have an inheritance, but they would be given land, and their inheritance was God. All right, so one other thing, notice that Joseph, now we kind of see, this may not be necessary, this wasn't necessarily the first occurrence of it, but we see kind of the growth of certain cities. He moved them into cities. Why? It was easier to manage. Now, the problem with crowding people together, sin multiplies, okay? Sin multiplies, you have more crime, you have more just everything wrong. But for the current situation here, notice he says that he moved them into cities. All right, verse 23. Then Joseph said to the people, understand today that I have acquired you and your land for Pharaoh. Here is seed for you, sow it in the land. At harvest you are to give a fifth of it to Pharaoh, and 4/5 will be yours as seed for the field and as for food for yourselves, your household, and your dependents. Verse 25, and they said, you have saved our lives. We have found favor in our Lord's eyes, and we will be Pharaoh's slaves. So Joseph made it a law. This is tax day, by the way, still in effect today in the land of Egypt, that a fifth of the produce belongs to Pharaoh. Only the priest's land does not belong to Pharaoh. Some people have sort of said or thought that this is a good tax base. Okay, I don't know. I can't speak to that since I'm not a financial or economical expert. Okay, whether or not you should say everybody gets taxed at a fifth or 20%. 20% is kind of high, so just think about that before you sort of think about that. There's a lot of talk about flat tax today. Again, I can't speak to, how great and how good that would be. I'm not an economist. For sure, there are people who are not paying their fair share of taxes, meaning billionaires. In other words, billionaires do not have to have that. But that's a whole other story I'm not going to get into here. All right. Verse 27. Israel settled into the land of Egypt. In the region of Goshen, they acquired property in it and became fruitful and very numerous. This is parenthetical right here. This is kind of setting up. This is a foreshadowing, especially when we get into the book of Exodus in just a few studies. Now Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, and his lifespan was 147 years. And when the time drew near for him to die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "If I found favor in your eyes, put your hand under my thigh. Promise me that you will deal with me in kindness and in faithfulness. Do not bury me in Egypt. When I rest with my fathers, carry me away from Egypt and bury me in a burial place." And Joseph answered, "I will do what you ask." And Jacob said, "Swear to me." So Joseph swore to him. Then Egypt bowed and thanked. Then Israel bowed in thanks at the head of his bed. So we're kind of at this point. We're in the last days of Jacob / Israel. We're in the last days. He's going to die. The next couple of chapters really will be giving his last words. Okay. And notice he says, "Do not bury me in Egypt." And this is something, now it's very interesting that Joseph is going to also say, "Carry my bones out." And then we will see that in the book of Exodus. And that, from Joseph's perspective, it won't be another 400 years till that happen. Obviously, in just a few days, or actually, time from this kind of scene here that Jacob is going to pass away, and he will be taken away. We're going to see this big kind of, you can almost say state funeral. And so, but going back to Joseph's, again, social and welfare, to me, programs, I'm going to say this, that the social and welfare programs should always be for those who truly need them. Now, what do I mean by truly need them? There are a lot of stuff that's going on, which I certainly will not get into, that people are billing as rights when they're in reality are not rights. In other words, you go back to God's initial plan, especially after man sinned. But even before sin, Adam was not going to be sitting around just, picking out grapes under a tree. Remember, he placed Adam in the garden to work the garden. This was before the fall. It wasn't going to be laborious work or hard work, but still work nonetheless. After the fall, he said you will work under the hard labor, the sweat of your brow. The point is, man should work as long as he is able to work. And then when he gets to a point where one thing, either he's at retirement age, or if he's unable to work, then that should happen. Now, that same thing applies to women. The idea of by the way, let me just say this, stay-at-home mother really wasn't necessarily how we view it today. Is a lot different. Stay-at-home mothers means that they did all the work at home. The work nonetheless. Here's my point. Because people, to me, did not act in the wisdom that God had given, that's why we have such inequities in how we deal things. People take advantage of systems, and on both sides. So I think Joseph gave us a very good wisdom. We're just never going to apply it because, again, people are wicked by nature. All right, guys, look. I'll see you in the next study. See you then. All right.